He left her counting coins, then froze when the black woman returned with a $1 billion nameplate. Lucian Whitmore stepped into the marble-lit lobby of Novelinks with the quiet certainty of a man used to being welcomed. Every polished stride of his Oxfords echoed off glass and chrome an orchestration of status. His charcoal suit molded to him like armor, the white gold Patek Philippe on his wrist glinted in the LED light. He passed the receptionist without slowing down, but for a flicker of a glance, nothing more, he looked at the massive framed photo hanging in the center of the lobby. A black woman stood there, centered strong, surrounded by a diverse team, her arms folded, eyes fierce. Lucien didn't pause, didn't blink. He didn't recognize her. 7 years earlier, that same woman had been scrubbing down tables at 11 p.m., hair tied back, uniform, wrinkled from a double shift. Alara was 24, then clinging to her future, like a match clings to flame. One hand held a towel, the other a copy of Entrepreneurship for Underdogs, creased, annotated, loved. When a customer dropped his leather briefcase and papers exploded across the floor, she moved instantly. "Are you okay?" she asked, crouching down, already gathering contracts and highlighters. That was the first time their eyes met. The man looked exhausted but polite. His tie was loosened, his shirt crisp. On the table behind him sat a thick, hardcover Harvard Law Review compendium. "Just came from moot court," he said. His name was Lucien. He came back 3 nights later. Then again, and again. Every time just before closing, always ordering black coffee, no sugar. But it wasn't the coffee. It was her. They'd sit across from each other. She's still in uniform. He's still in shirt and tie, talking about regulation gaps, racial name bias, and R-some-S, and the hidden taxes of being underestimated. She told him about her dream, a sales management app for small business owners, like her mom, who couldn't even keep track of who still owed her for laundry service. "That's the most useful thing I've heard all month," he said once, genuinely impressed. And when she brushed it off, he leaned in with this strange burning certainty in his eyes. "You have something rare." This weird, blazing certainty. Their story wrote itself in quiet, stolen moments. Lunches in the park with law books and UI wireframes. A first-hand hold between bookshelves in a second-hand shop, his grip steady, hers trembling. The night they sketched a business model on a napkin and their hands accidentally touched, neither moved for 2 full seconds. Then both pulled back. Then laughed. They began to orbit each other, like gravity was stitched into their skin. Until one night, Lucien invited her to a rooftop bar. It was loud with ambition. His friends, founders, funders, the born wired for Wall Street kind, talked over each other in acronyms, IP, OV, C, C, a C. Everyone polished. Everyone white. She said she studied at a community college. A pause. Then came the smiles. "That's cute," one said. "Real hustle." Another very TED Talk material. A man pouring wine leaned in and whispered Cinderella stories rarely scale. Lucien reached under the table and gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. "She's got more grind than any of us." Alara smiled, but inside she felt it, that glass wall between them and her. Later that week, Lucien asked, "Would you like to meet my parents?" Alara prepared, like it was a second thesis defense. She read up on modern art market trends and how to ask safe but clever questions. She practiced walking in heels she couldn't afford, bought secondhand. She even tried a different laugh, softer, more contained. On the night of the dinner, the Whitmore estate glowed like something from another planet. Chandeliers shimmered, a baby grand piano slept in the corner, and Judith Whitmore greeted her with a surgically polite smile. "I'm so glad to finally meet you, dear." Dinner was venison roast and vintage red. Alara talked about her app idea, a tool to help laundromats and corner stores send automated reminders to regulars. Judith smiled thinly. "Dear, not everyone is born with the luxury of knowing when to scale back. Some of us are unburdened by hunger." Alara blinked, trying to smile. When she mentioned SMS integration for shops, Judith cut in again. "Amanda from Yale just raised $3 million for a green fintech solution. She's a visionary." Lucien stayed silent. He twirled the stem of his wineglass and said nothing. Didn't defend. Didn't interrupt. Alara's hand gripped her cloth napkin until it wrinkled like paper. She kept her smile, but her heart had slipped behind her ribs and gone quiet. After dessert, Judith looped her arm through her husband's and said, almost as if reciting a verdict, "Sweet girl, but definitely not marriage material." Alora heard every word. She didn't flinch, didn't cry, just stood, clutched her thrifted purse tighter. Lucien walked her to the car. The air was cool. He didn't reach for her hand. Didn't ask if she was okay. He only said softly, "You looked beautiful tonight." She nodded, smiled a soft mechanical curve of the lips. Then she stepped back. One small step. But it said everything. She gave a small, hollow smile, nodded, then stepped 1 foot back. That was all one backward step, and something irreparable shifted. After that night, Lucien's texts thinned out like late autumn leaves. Gone were the long paragraphs about his day, his fascination with her app idea, the "I miss you already" that used to appear before she even made it home. Now, it was busy, talk later, or nothing at all. When Alora brought up her new POS mini-concept for salons, something sleek, affordable, intuitive for non-tech savvy owners, Lucien's reply came 2 hours later, Square's doing something similar. "Market's tight." She stared at the screen, blinking. Not a single question. Not even a "sounds interesting." Just a verdict handed down like a bored professor marking her wrong. Still, she pressed forward. She crafted a business plan. Clean, tight, hopeful. She sent it with a short message, "Would love your thoughts, been working on this all week." 3 days passed. When his reply came, it was a single sentence nice deck. "Needs polish." That was it. No call. No comment on her ideas. Just detachment, masked as professionalism. And then, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, an email arrived from Judith Whitmore. It was a forward from a teaching fellowship at the local educator center, one of those stable, quietly noble career paths. Attached was a note in Judith's soft, expensive font. "This might be the security you're seeking, dear. Tech is unpredictable." Alora didn't respond. She couldn't. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard like something had died on her lap. A week later, Lucien invited her to a gala. His firm was hosting a fundraiser, old money, new deals, legacy, power, on parade. "It's important," he'd said, tightening his cufflinks, "but don't bring up your app tonight. Just blend in." He kissed her cheek like he was handing off a fragile package. She said nothing, just nodded. She borrowed a black dress from her roommate and paired it with borrowed heels and a clutch with a broken clasp she fixed using a tiny safety pin. At the venue, golden chandeliers spilled soft light on marble floors. A string quartet murmured Vivaldi as servers glided by with trays of foie gras. At their table, men discussed IP strategies in Asia. Women compared notes on their family trusts. Midway through dinner, a silver-haired woman with pearl drop earrings turned to her. "And you, Alora, what are you building?" She opened her mouth. But before she could speak, Lucien leaned in smoothly, she's still exploring. Taking time to find the right path. The table nodded politely. The moment passed. Alora sat still, fingers tight around her wineglass, the stem biting into her palm. She didn't speak for the rest of the night. In the car ride home, Lucien smiled faintly. "You were elegant tonight," he said, eyes forward. "And silent. Perfect." That was the night something inside her began to dry out. A week later came the third funding rejection. This time, the reason stung more than the denial itself. "We recommend finding a co-founder with financial pedigree or institutional backing." Translation: "You alone aren't credible enough." She sat on the floor of her apartment, surrounded by a constellation of failed applications and soggy tissues. The words "insufficient experience" blurred on the page beneath her tears. That evening, Lucien showed up. Still in his tailored suit tie, loosened just enough to suggest exhaustion, but not intimacy. He leaned against the doorframe like a man trying to delay a cab, not comfort a woman. "My mom was right," he said, avoiding eye contact. "This is affecting us both." Alora looked up. Her voice was hoarse but steady. "Is it because I'm ambitious, because I'm not stable, or is it because I'm not white?" He didn't answer immediately. His gaze wandered to the floor, to the cracked tiles, to anything but her. "Maybe," he said finally, "you're just not ready for someone like me." And with that, everything cold and condescending in his tone confirmed what she had already begun to suspect. He was never going to fight for her. She rose slowly. No yelling. No begging. Just a soft, contained rage that filled the room like smoke. "Get out," she said. Lucien lingered. But he didn't apologize. He didn't kneel. He didn't even close the door quietly behind him. He just left lightly like he'd never belonged there in the first place. She stood still for several minutes. Then she walked into the bathroom. She didn't cry. Not again. Not this time. She sat on the cold tiles, knees to her chest, while the tap in the kitchen dripped like a ticking clock. The silence wrapped around her like a second skin. By 3 a.m., she was up. Her reflection stared back at her in the mirror, eyes bloodshot, cheeks, hollow resolve blooming like fire. She tied her hair up into a tight bun, washed her face, sat down at her laptop. She rewrote her resume. From scratch. No more humble phrasing. No more aspiring founder or learning to build. She was relentless, resourceful, and done apologizing. She opened 17 tabs. Startup job boards. Remote internship listings. Local accelerators. She applied to each one with a different cover letter, personalized, punchy, sharp. Each email had the same subject line, relentless learner. Will outwork your best hire. When she hit send on the last one, the sky outside was just beginning to tint a deep, defeated blue. She stood in front of the mirror once more. Her lips were trembling, but her voice wasn't. Let's see if the world fears a woman who refuses to shrink. The email came at 3:14 a.m., a plain subject line, unpaid tech intern, remote queue, a plus support role, flexible hours. Alara stared at it, blinking away the sting in her eyes. Her fingers moved before doubt could catch up. Yes, I'll start tomorrow. By noon, she'd borrowed $100 from her mother and booked the cheapest bus ticket she could find. 2 duffel bags. 1 busted laptop with a cracked hinge. No contacts, no comfort, no parachute. Just a relentless, aching will. Charlotte wasn't welcoming. The boarding house she could afford had peeling ceilings and a bathroom that smelled like mildew. Her roommate was an art student who smoked all day and painted naked women on torn cardboard. But Alara didn't care. She balanced her ancient laptop on 2 borrowed textbooks and got to work. Every day, wake at 6 o'clock in remotely by 7-9 hours of testing buggy systems, logging software issues, and writing documentation that no one would ever thank her for. Every night, YouTube on a phone with a shattered screen, tutorials on Python Apis schemas. She scribbled notes on ramen wrappers and used bus passes. Survival didn't ask for aesthetics. Groceries became arithmetic. Bread or eggs, not both. Pasta 3 times a week. She counted change with the precision of a sniper. Her bank account was a joke, but her curiosity that was limitless. She began to see patterns. Little inefficiencies that crushed small businesses, owners who couldn't track their online orders, who didn't know how much inventory they had left, who manually texted clients, one by one. She jotted every pain point down like gospel. On a sheet of notebook paper, she drew the first wireframe of an app Lego. A dashboard with just 3 buttons. 1 hand operation. Real-time numbers. Customer chat. Simple. Sharp. Smart. She scraped together every cent she had bought the cheapest hosting package she could find and registered a tech domain. The security plan basic. Laughably basic. But it would do. She printed brochures in black and white at the library, riding the bus with a worn-out backpack and a borrowed iPad. She knocked on doors, Yemeni bakeries, Haitian salons, tiny Mexican corner stores. 5 minutes, she'd say. Just give me 5 minutes to show you what I built. Most said no. Some said maybe. A few said yes. One Dominican store owner stared at her like she'd just landed from another planet. You built this alone, she nodded once. Yes. No one helped me. Yet, funding was brutal. 4 micro-investors passed on her, 2 solo, 2 scrappy, 2 disconnected. One man looked her in the eye and said, "You're smart. But this is tech. Find a guy with credentials. Be the COO." That night, she walked home in silence. She didn't cry, just whispered to herself, "Let's see how long they ignore me." She walked 2 miles to attend a female founder conference. No rideshare, no heels, just dusty sneakers and hope. She wasn't on the speaker list. Her name had been mysteriously dropped last minute. She sat in the back, absorbing the applause showered on polished women in blazers, who all seemed to have Ivy League degrees and perfect LinkedIn pages. Then during Q and as she stood, "If you only trust the proven, she asked, voice steady. How will anyone new ever lead? Silence fell like glass shattering. Hundreds of eyes turned, and someone noticed. Rosa Ledesma, tech entrepreneur, investor, survivor of 3 failed startups, now a mentor. After 2 private meetings, Rosa didn't hesitate. $100K, she said, and 12 months of mentorship. No strings. With that check in hand, Alara got to work. She hired a back-end dev in India who coded at night and a UI designer in Nigeria who crafted clean, efficient interfaces. She taught herself Firebase, integrated Stripe, sketched demos in Figma like her life depended on it because it did. Each evening, she walked door to door again. Laundry shops, nail salons, bakeries. She offered Relego for free in exchange for reviews and brutal feedback. One Korean dry cleaning owner liked the app so much, she made a TikTok about it. Business is hard, but this helps. It's from a woman who knows our kind of chaos. The clip hit 1 million views in 2 days. Downloads exploded, 20,000 installs. Her inbox flooded. Phone buzzed nonstop. People weren't just interested, they were desperate. Relego wasn't just a tool. It was a lifeline. And Alara, James, the black woman who once counted coins before checkout, was now the founder of a name spreading like wildfire across every corner of the underserved small business world. Novalinks was born in that fire. The old her, the one who had waited for someone to recognize her value, was gone. And Lucien, he had no idea yet, but he'd soon walk into a building that bore her name in stainless steel and glass. She wasn't asking to be seen anymore. She'd built something they couldn't ignore. Not even him. If this story moved you, too, maybe you're meant to be here. Stay with us. Subscribe. They called it a fluke. Said it was TikTok magic. Said the spike in downloads would vanish as fast as it came. But while the world kept talking, Alara moved. Quietly, precisely, fiercely. Novalinks Technologies was born inside a cramped kitchen with a flickering stove light and a whiteboard that was really the back of a closet door. She drew the logo herself, a black lynx, lean and alert, its emerald eyes catching the light like truth. It wasn't just branding. It was a warning. She wasn't here to be pretty or polite. She was here to hunt. Her first hires weren't the usual Silicon Valley pedigree. They were survivors. Malik, a self-taught coder who once hacked his school system to raise a friend's GPA and spent a year in juvenile detention. Rosa, a single mom of 2, who balanced spreadsheets between Walmart night shifts. Tyra, an ex-IT teacher, forced out by school board politics for daring to introduce her students to radical ideas like bias in algorithms. And Devin, a design student, suspended for calling out his professor's theft of student projects. Every one of them came to the table with scars and fire. And under Alara's lead, that fire didn't just burn, it forged. They worked out of her rental's kitchen. Zoom meetings crackled through glitchy webcams. Sticky notes covered the fridge, the sink, even the walls. Every update, every user complaint, every tiny win recorded, tracked, celebrated like it was oxygen. Investors didn't take her seriously at first. They misspelled her name in emails, called her Nora, asked who her CTO was, who the real founders were. One well-known VC leaned back during a pitch and smirked. "You're just the face." Right then came the offer. $800, zero. A major fund wanted to buy Relego outright. She read the email 3 times, then sent a 3-word reply: "I don't sell silence." Because that's what it was. A buyout was a muzzle, and Alara had spent too long being ignored. 6 months later, Relego passed 500 users. The press finally stopped calling her a young upstart and started calling her the dark horse of inclusive tech. That title didn't make her smile, it made her sharper. Year 2, they expanded to Asia. A major chain of point-of-sale systems in the Philippines signed on, citing the app's clarity and cultural flexibility. Relego hit 2 million users. Small business owners posted about it on their Facebook groups, WhatsApp chains, even church bulletins. It was the app built by someone who gets it. And they meant it. Then came Berlin, the Women in Tech Global Conference. Alara wasn't meant to be the headliner, but someone pulled out. And someone whispered her name. She stood on a stage that smelled of wood polish and nerves, looked out at rows of pressed suits and tired eyes and eager interns, and told the story of what it feels like to be invisible in rooms you worked twice as hard to enter. "What do you miss?" she asked, "when you underestimate someone." A pause. "Everything." By the end of her speech, half the audience was on their feet. Some were crying. Some looked stunned. A few ashamed. "They made me feel invisible," she said, voice steady, eyes blazing. "So I built something they can't unsee." The video of that moment hit 1 million views in 2 days. Emails flooded in, investors, reporters, tech schools, even an artist asking to paint her portrait in oils. One of the hands that reached out belonged to a former investor, the one who'd once said she needed a white male co-founder to stabilize her optics. He shook her hand at a conference, leaned in close and whispered. She met his gaze. "You weren't the only one." Then came the bell. Alara stood at the New York Stock Exchange in a tailored white suit. Her hair was twisted into a crown of coils. On either side of her stood Rosa and the foster mother, who'd once worked 2 shifts a day to put food on their table. The 3 of them rang the bell together. The clang echoed across marble floors, across TV broadcasts, into living rooms, onto timelines, through histories. And in the quiet that followed, the kind of quiet that comes only after seismic triumph, Alara went home alone and opened an old wooden box. Inside was a single folded letter. Yellowed. Familiar handwriting. "I'll always be proud of you no matter what happens." Signed, Lucien. She stared at it. Not with bitterness, but with clarity. She struck a match. The letter curled, blackened, became ash. The firelight caught in her eyes. Again, not rage, not pain, but something else. Cleansing. A release. Novelinks was preparing its expansion into Europe. New headquarters in Amsterdam. New initiatives around multilingual integration. A call went out. They needed a director of international legal affairs. Someone who understood cross-border compliance, cultural nuance, and scalable systems. The hiring process was discreet but thorough. Alara read every finalist file herself. Then one afternoon, as she reviewed team updates in her office, her assistant knocked softly. First candidate for legal director Lucien Whitmore. Everything stilled. She didn't speak, didn't blink, just stood, completely still. Not because she was afraid, but because the universe had just handed her the final page of a story she'd rewritten. And this time she held the pen. Lucien walked into the glass conference room at Novalink's shoulders, squared a slim leather portfolio in his left hand. The late morning sun bathed the marble floor in sharp white streaks gleaming against the minimalist furniture, the brushed steel fixtures. He moved with quiet confidence until his eyes found her. Sitting at the head of the table, dressed in charcoal and calm authority, was Alara. His steps faltered. The hand holding the portfolio dropped slightly. The color drained from his face. She didn't flinch. "Please?" she said, her voice steady, devoid of any inflection side. Lucien obeyed without a word, settling into the chair across from her. 2 members of HR sat on either side of the table, eyes darting between the two, like silent referees to a game they hadn't realized they were in. Alara, Lucien began, voice cracking. "You're here for the legal director role. Let's proceed." Just like that. No small talk. No warmth. No opening for nostalgia. He cleared his throat, unfastened his portfolio, and started speaking as if on autopilot. 8 years in litigation at Gerson and Cole. 3 M&A deals across EU jurisdictions. Fluent in German, studied in Munich. Connected to compliance officers throughout Brussels and Amsterdam. Alara flipped through the pages of his RSUM, her eyes scanning as if assessing a stranger. "Your credentials are thorough," she said. A pause. Then her eyes met his. "Tell me what happened to the firm you chose over me." He looked down at his hands. "There was a scandal. Embezzlement among the partners. The firm dissolved. I was laid off during the restructuring." No reaction from her. "And Judith?" she asked, tone still even. "Does she know you're applying to work under a black woman?" Now Lucien gave a tight, bitter smile. "She hasn't spoken to me in years. Didn't even come to my disbarment hearing." Alara stood and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. The city below glittered like it always did, oblivious to the reckonings happening in rooms like these. Her back to him, she said softly, You left when I had nothing. Not a dollar. Not a degree. Not even a chair that didn't squeak. She turned, then gazed steely, voice sharper. And now you return because I built something. No, he said, standing slowly, palms open. I came because this company stands for something. Because I saw your name and realized I never stopped being proud. She narrowed her eyes. You were never proud. You were afraid I'd embarrass you. Lucienne took a step forward. I was weak. I let my mother dictate what success looked like. I believed pedigree mattered more than perseverance. And I lost the one woman who had both. There it was. The silence. The kind that doesn't wait to be broken, but dares to hold the moment hostage. Alara slowly sat down again, folding her hands atop the table. This isn't about what you lost. It's about whether you fit here now. Lucienne didn't blink. I'm not here to reclaim the past. I'm here to contribute to something bigger. If you'll let me. She said nothing at first. Then her hand moved toward a page in his file labeled Culture and Values. She flipped it open, her highlighter, tracing over 3 bold words: resilience, transparency, accountability. He waited. Finally, she looked up. Let me tell you what this role demands, she said. It requires someone who doesn't crumble under discomfort. Someone who can stand in front of a room of founders, employees, partners, and own both their past and their present. Lucienne nodded. Then let me show you I can. She leaned back. You'll report to someone 10 years younger than you. She's my former intern. She'll mentor you on community law engagement. You'll lead a workshop at the district's public school system pro bono. Lucienne exhaled, almost smiling. If that's the price of building trust, I'll pay it twice. She didn't smile back, but something in her gaze shifted, a fractional release in her jawline, like ice giving way to a slow thaw. Then she closed the file and tapped it once with her index finger. Final interviews will conclude this week. You'll be notified by end of day Friday. He stood, understood. As he walked to the door, she spoke once more. Lucienne. He turned. Her voice dropped, quiet but precise. This place was never built to make you comfortable. It was built to make sure people like me never have to shrink again. He held her gaze, nodding once. Then, I'm ready to grow into it. She said nothing more. When the door closed, Alara sat still. Then reached for her pen, drawing a small check beside his name. But she didn't circle it. Not yet. She looked back at the highlighted page, those 3 words glowing beneath office light. Then, with a voice that could have cut glass, she whispered, almost to herself, let's see if your integrity is scalable. The morning light sliced across the polished oak floor of the Novelinks boardroom, casting long shadows from the floor to ceiling glass. Alara sat at the head of the table, her back straight, hands folded. Around her, the board members waited, eyes sharp, respectful. She looked each one in the eye, then spoke low, unwavering. We hire skills, but we keep those who build culture. This company breathes resilience. The door opened. Lucienne stepped in. Gone was the silver tie, the watch that once gleamed like a declaration. His suit was simpler now, a little more lived in. No cologne, no showmanship. Just him carrying the weight of every wrong turn he once defended as right. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, he said softly, but I want to earn your leadership. Alara didn't blink. She reached for a folder on the table and slid it across to him. You'll be on probation for 90 days. Every interaction, every piece of feedback from your team will be reviewed. Lucienne nodded once, silent. You'll lead a pro bono legal workshop for our community school district. And she added, voice now cool steel. You'll be mentored by someone who used to be my student. A flicker crossed Lucienne's face. Not resistance, just the sharp sting of consequence. If I fail, he said, I'll leave with dignity. But I won't fail. He turned and walked out, quiet, deliberate. The door clicked shut behind him. A single drop of sweat traced its way down his temple. Alara stood. Her heels clicked gently as she moved toward the hallway, toward a gallery space few visited, unless they were looking for something deeper than metrics. On the wall were snapshots of Novelinks' defining moments. Milestones framed not just in success, but in struggle. She paused before a photo of the company's IPO. The frame bore a bold quote built by the underestimated. For the unstoppable. Her gaze fell to the image beneath. The original founding team. Eyes lit with that fire only those who've been doubted truly know. Each face was a mirror of defiance and grace. Then her own photo. Alara on that day. White tailored suit. The exchange bell clutched in one hand. Eyes blazing with everything she'd swallowed for years. The insults, the dismissals, the nights she couldn't afford both Wi-Fi and dinner. That woman in the photo had walked through fire. But the one standing before it now, she'd learned how to walk through silence too and make it sing. She reached up, adjusting the edge of the frame slightly, then turned. No pause. No sentimental glance back. She didn't need to be seen anymore. Didn't need permission. Didn't crave retribution. She had already rebuilt the world that once shut her out. In the quiet corridor, the camera of memory captured her shoes, sleek, black, powerful. A far cry from the scuffed flats she wore the day she met Judith. She smiled faintly, not for vanity, but for the symbolism. Even her soles now had stories to tell. Then the rooftop. Wind teased the hem of her blazer as she stepped into the open. The skyline stretched before her, a reminder of how far she'd come and how little of it had been gifted. Behind her, the sound of sneakers on concrete. "Miss Alara," a young voice called. She turned to see a dark-skinned intern, no older than 23, eyes wide with adrenaline and awe. He held up a rolled magazine. "We just got featured in Forbes." Front page, she took the magazine hand steady. Cover showed her shoulders squared, gaze forward, crown of locks wrapped in soft silk, the city behind her blurred, as if time itself bowed to her presence. The headline read, "The black woman who didn't just rise, she rebuilt the rules." She exhaled. A moment passed. And then, breaking the fourth wall, because some truths aren't meant to stay inside, she whispered, not to the intern, not to the wind, but to us. "He said I didn't fit his world, so I built one where he had to ask for entry." A pause. When they say you're not enough, don't argue. Just build. Let your silence echo louder than their doubt. He didn't recognize the black woman he left because she didn't just return. She rebuilt everything they thought she'd never have. This story isn't just about proving someone wrong. It's about reclaiming power. About how a black woman turned silence into her loudest answer. Maybe you've been overlooked too. Maybe someone left thinking you'd stay small forever. So what would you do if they came back needing you? Would you welcome them, challenge them, or simply stand where you are now unshaken? If this story resonated, go ahead and subscribe, hit like. And tell us this, what would you say if someone who once left you suddenly needed to be seen by you? Thanks for watching. Until the next story, where another black woman reminds the world who they forgot to respect.